Hello, my name is Dr. Chris Brown. I'm the founding dean of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. Welcome to HSS Insights, a series of conversations with faculty showcasing unique research and work focused on creativity, innovation, public service, and addressing social issues. Today, I'm joined by Dr. David Viscoli, Professor of Music and Distinguished Faculty Scholar in the Department of Performing Arts. He primarily teaches all piano-related music courses. He also teaches music history and musicianship. In addition, he performs as a soloist and chamber musician nationally and internationally. Welcome, Dr. Viscoli.
Thank you, Dean Brown.
So now we're at Dr. Viscoli's office that also serves as his studio. Dr. Viscoli, tell us, at what age did you start playing the piano?
Well, I think I was about 3. In our house there was a piano. And they said one day I found it and I started playing. And then my mother and my grandmother started working with me at a very young age.
How did your grandmother teach you how to play the piano?
She worked with me every day.
Okay.
She sat next to me and practiced with me. How healthy is that? I don't know. but that's what we did.
When you played at these different performances as a young kid, how did that influence the direction that you're taking now as a professor?
I've always played the piano. It's always been a part of me. It just was sort of a natural evolution that just kept going. When I was a teenager, I remember, a lot of my friends wanted to go do this, go do that, and I'm like, I gotta practice. Then going to Interlochen Arts Academy, which is a boarding school for the arts, that sort of saved me because you're surrounded by other musicians, but also dancers, actors, and all of a sudden you're in an environment where everybody else is just as serious as you are.
How would you say being in this space influenced your own creativity?
That's not just me practicing in a vacuum,
Yes.
just doing my thing. Now all of a sudden I'm like, well, that person's practicing 3 hours over there. I've got to step up my game,
What is it about being a piano player that influences the passion that you have for playing?
Because I don't remember choosing the piano, it's almost like the piano chose me. I feel like a piano is a very complete instrument and that you've got highs, the lows, the complexity of the music that you can play at the piano. You're not doing one line, you're doing lots of different things. So that sort of is a never-ending challenge. It's a wonderful world to be in.
I remember 15 years ago when I first saw you play, you invited me to come watch you. I was intrigued by the rhythm and pace. How long does it take one to really learn that particular kind of technique?
I had a teacher who really felt technique was vitally important. He used to always say, technique it's like a toolbox. I did about an hour of technique a day for about 10 years. And that's just doing exercises and things like that. Then you'd work on your music for the rest of your practice session.
Who influenced you, or who continues to influence you?
Previous teachers. Sometimes I'll be teaching and I'll be saying something and I think, oh wow, I sounded like that teacher, or oh, I sounded like that teacher. You can't escape that, I don't think. After my grandmother said, okay, I've done all I can do with you. Now we need you to go have formal lessons.
Can you tell us a little bit about places you traveled to?
I'm actually going down to Panama, and I've been lucky to be a part of a festival down there.
Okay.
I think this will be my 6th time down there. Played in Canada, Korea, Taiwan, Europe, Spain, Austria, Germany.
What type of music do you play?
Mostly classical, but in different concertos, soloing with an orchestra, or I've got a group that does 2 piano and percussion.
Okay.
Or chamber music, solo playing of course too, so just lots of different genres.
Dr. Viscoli, I see that you have a CD. What was the creative process like?
These are all live performances, well enough that I could put it on a CD. So those are all live, but I did just finish another recording project, which is all of Rachmaninoff's Etude Tableau. Just finished editing and mastering that, so I hope to get that up online somewhere soon.
How do you see your role as a piano player influence your research?
So every time I do a performance, there's a certain amount of research that goes into just understanding the composer, the music, when it was written. We play all this music from Western Europe all the time and all this. And I thought, I want to do something that's different than what we always do. So I did a Latin American program That included composers from Cuba, Brazil, Mexico, Argentina. I grew up in New Mexico. There's a lot of Latin culture there too. So this has always been something that I've been interested in. And I remember Dr. David Viscoli, who used to be my colleague, he said he just loved listening to me practice that Latin American program. And then he says it actually influenced him to compose a piece that had some Latin rhythms in it. I like to think that, I got interested in something and then it affected one of my colleagues.
And ladies and gentlemen, from the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at Minnesota State University, Mankato, the world-famous David Viscoli.
What was it like for you to perform the Frank Zappa tribute?
That was a big stretch for me because that's like nothing I've ever done before. It was really a lot of fun and really glad I did it. As a classical musician, we just learn the music, the notes are in front of us. And this was sort of, getting charts that you didn't have everything. And I had to listen to recordings and try to sort of piece together what I wanted to do. The other challenge was usually when I go out on stage, it's just acoustic and there are no mics and there's no speakers, there aren't any monitors. Now all of a sudden I find myself in a situation where it's really loud. I'm wearing earplugs. There's a monitor. I can hear this, but I can't always hear this. And it's a whole different environment.
Where did the invitation come for you to play Frank Zappa?
One day I was standing on the corner, either walking my dog or shoveling snow. And Joe Tugas comes walking across the street and he said, "Hey, what are you doing? What are you working on these days?" And I said, "I don't have a concert coming right up." And he's like, "Great, so are we going to do Zappa?" And so finally I said, "Okay, fine, we'll do it." The rehearsal before the concert was the first time we had everybody together. There's always somebody that couldn't make one rehearsal or somebody couldn't make another rehearsal. But Joe Tugas said that I had the perfect attendance.
If we move over to piano, because I want to talk to you a little bit more about how you engage your students and how you teach your students. How much of playing the piano is based on your feel and spontaneity rather than something so technical?
The music should encompass the technique. There are difficult passages where it's very technical, but it should not interfere with the feeling of the music.
How have you seen your growth since from the time you were undergraduate to now?
I think generally I'm a bit more relaxed. Dr. Viscoli talks about how to relax, give it a bigger sound when you're more relaxed, and I think that kind of helps me with playing.
I'd probably put a little more of a pedal break in there so that the subito piano can happen. Okay. Because remember we talked about, just so that the sound clears for a second. Okay, right.
Yeah.
Now try playing it just. Right, is that better?
Better, yeah.
Remember your friend rhythms, right?
Yeah, yep.
Start there and you don't think about 13, you just play all the notes. Right.
Dr. Viscoli is very detailed in his approach. How do you feel that helps you?
I think the detail-orientedness really helps me to respect even more the piece and who used to do this stuff. It's not just notes, but there's all these other parts to it, because sometimes I used to be really focused on just getting the notes right and all the rest didn't totally click, and now I'm trying to make the rest of it click.
What other courses do you teach?
I teach all the piano-related courses: accompanying, piano literature, piano pedagogy, accompanying for choral music educators, music history. I'll be teaching music theory in the fall.
Such a variety. What's your teaching approach?
I try to teach every student, whether they're a complete beginner or they're a master's student, start with that level where the student is and get them better. I take my beginning students just as seriously as I take my master's students. I have the same expectations for practice and for applying themselves.
I asked a question about your teaching approach, and then you said It's not you who is teaching, it is Chopin who's doing the teaching. So the value of the written script and learning how to read music so that you can play music.
You have to look at the music and try to get into Chopin's head or Beethoven's head and understand what they're trying to get you to do. Whereas if you're only listening to music, you're going to be listening to a recording of somebody else's interpretation of what they think Beethoven wants. So that's why I think it's dangerous to be listening to music before you've created your own understanding of what you think Beethoven's trying to say. Because then you're just going to be imitating.
How do you engage the more advanced student? How do you start teaching them? Where do you start with these?
You evaluate their level, where they are. You know, they may have taken lessons for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, who knows. And then you start to see, well, I think they could work on this area. They could work on this area. I usually try to find out what composers they've played, try to fill holes. Like say, okay, you've done a lot of Beethoven and Bach, but you haven't done any Chopin or Debussy. I try to fill in the gaps. And then you find their strengths, you encourage their strengths. And then if you find weaknesses, you work on those areas.
What do you want your students to value about music and playing the piano?
Music is so important to so many people, right? Even people that don't play listen to music. They listen to the radio, they listen to music, they go to concerts. And I think it's such an integral part of life, right? I mean, there are few people that don't listen to any kind of music, right? And there are so many different kinds of music. So I just try to get my students to value what they're doing and to play that music the best that they can.
How would you engage the student who doesn't have the experience?
For example, I teach a class piano for non-majors. Most of my private lessons are people that are in music because they're in a music degree. So that's a little bit different, but the thing about the class piano is you get all these non-majors who just want to learn how to play the instrument because they're excited about it. It's more fun to teach someone that is just so eager to learn. They're excited because they're learning, how to play an instrument. So that's very gratifying.
When you talk about pedaling and harmony and rhythm and pacing, how does this all come together?
It's mentioning all these things and hopefully explaining to them in a way that makes sense and having them understand how these things all come together. A lot of nuts and bolts sort of type things. Like it's like if you're a mechanic and there's something's not quite working. Hopefully the student has sort of a concept in their mind of where they're trying to go with a piece. And you sort of say, well, I think that's what they're trying to do. So you try to come in and say, okay, well, have you tried this? Have you tried this? And try to give them things that are going to make their idea and their concept go in a way that makes sense to not only them, but to the listener. Music education is preparing that next generation of music lovers, but also musicians. Without music education, we're not creating a new group of people that's going to understand and appreciate music. So I think it's vital, not just at the college level, but grade school and kindergarten and high school to have music education.
Dr. Viscoli, how about we go back to the recital hall and you play part of the piece that you're going to play for the trio event?
Sure, I'll play.
Wow, that's great. Can you tell us a little bit about the recital hall here? This is where you have your music studio class. Can you talk about how you bring the students together?
Class is for everyone that's taking private piano lessons, and we all come together once a week. They play for each other, and then I usually open it up to my students and I ask them to make comments. So it gives them a chance to think creatively, ask questions, and get them engaged. And I have students of all levels, so the very beginning students to the master students all come together and they all play for each other.
You as the professor, what role do you play in facilitating the feedback?
And after the students have all had their say, then I'll usually work with the student, sort of like a mini lesson in front of the other students.
Tell us, how many years have you been teaching?
Over 30 years.
Here at MSU?
No, here 25.
Here 25 years, wow. What do you think is the main skill that students learn that help them move forward in their careers by learning to play music?
I think it's the amount of discipline that it takes and the work ethic, because they have to spend a lot of time practicing, honing their skills. But I think that discipline is what also translates into career opportunities outside of music.
The value of liberal arts and the arts in general, I mean, is so important in how we engage our students and what we teach our students so they can be great professionals as they move out of college. Thank you very much, Professor Viscoli. Thank you, Dr. Viscoli.
Thank you, Dean Brown.
If you're interested in learning more about Dr. Viscoli and his work in the Department of Performing Arts and the music program, visit hss.mnsu.edu/music. For more information on our faculty research series and to view more episodes, visit hss.mnsu.edu/insights. Thank you.